about power and the way, and I think the lessons that capitalism came out of the 60s and the early 70s was that if you want power, then you have to give people some ownership of the system. And what do you want to give them ownership of? Well, give them ownership of the problems. The problem is the debt. And so we're seeing, you know, the highest level of debt, individual debt, ever recorded in human history in Australia. Those sorts of changes within capitalism were always as a result of the successes of organised labour and the people. Colonial countries in the First World was similarly, has brought about similar changes in capitalism. When Vietnam fell to the people, you saw capitalism say to itself, we cannot afford the old first, second, third world divide. We actually have to adapt and change. So part of that was the movement of our jobs offshore. First world manufacturing jobs especially moved to the developing countries, and we saw the process where globalisation began to argue, capitalism began to argue that globalisation was that process where workers and people in one-time colonial countries could actually grow their way out of poverty. And we saw all the arguments around the increase in size in the middle class in what used to be third world countries, and what a good thing that was, because that would trickle down and those countries would eventually have what we have.
We always hear the threat of China about low wages, and it's certainly not the case. While wages are a factor, it's not the factor. The winning ingredients that they have in China is, again, infrastructure, skills development, investment in research, research and development, innovation, and it's about them keeping an eye on the future as well as the present. And that's something that's been lacking in this country for the last 11 years. What they do well is, you know, they have like clusters. They cluster, you know, their various operations or their innovation or their high-end manufacturing in areas. We're not doing that. There's a little bit of that going on at the moment, but more needs to be done. There's greater networking between the companies that feed into other larger companies. Auto industry is a classic example. You've got your main contractors and they have the clusters of the auto components that feed in. They all network. They all, you know, go in there, and it works quite well. That's what we need to be looking at over here. With the trend at the moment for free trade agreements is, you know, countries are rushing to look at, you know, signing more up, and you know, the current government's talking about, you know, more free trade arrangements. They're looking at doing it less on a country by country basis, but more on a region by region basis. So, you know, you do the ASEAN region and look at getting, you know, the one agreement that sort of sets the rules for there. And our position is has always been consistent that, you know, we're going to enter into free trade agreements. Well, we've got to be mindful of the impact it has on jobs here. Secondly, we should be able to retain our rights to give preferential treatment to locally manufactured goods and services. Thirdly, of course, there's health and safety and human rights issues that need to be addressed, and wages and conditions, and all those have to be built into that. And globally, we know that they're positioning themselves to, you know, to look to the market of the future. And we're hoping that the same consideration is going to be given. We have consistently said as a union that the last government was asleep at the wheel. 11 years. Yeah. We lost 100,000 jobs, and recently, you know, the latest statistics being Mitsubishi. That's why, as a union, we've pushed quite hard at a state and now a federal level for the right procurement policies to be put in place, and we want procurement policies from government at a state and federal level that gives preference to locally manufactured products. Again, what we're trying to do is to attract global investment into this country. But in addition to that, we should be positioning our auto component industry as well, about trying to get in as part of the global supply networks that come in. But the very nature of manufacturing is changing over the years. We see, you know, manufacturing in the future areas being more in the innovation high end, in the biomedical areas, in food technology there. Of course, you've still got your traditional ones. Ships have still got to be built, trains have got to be built, cars have got to be built, and we see no reason why we can't be, you know, doing that here.